Hello, I'm Paula Bolton, co-founder of Lesbian Labour. Welcome to our Proud Lesbian series. During Pride Month, I'll be interviewing a wide range of lesbians to gather lesbian perspectives and to hear about lesbian lives in 2022. And with me for my 10th interview is Julie Furlong, who's in Leeds. Hello, Julie.
Good day, Paula.
So would you mind starting us off by telling us a bit about your life as a lesbian?
That's such an odd question, isn't it? I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but it's like saying, what's your life as a human being? What's your life as a bipedal species? I don't know. It's just life, isn't it? It's
coming out story, maybe, or, you know, how the battles to be a lesbian in this life, maybe if I reframe it that way.
Yeah, that was all different. It was all university years for me. I was fortunate enough to go to university, which was really good for me. It gave me time to do a lot of thinking about a lot of things. And I came out just that year, just as I ended university. In fact, I didn't come straight out. I gave myself a brief, I can't cope with men. I don't actually like them that much, or not in that way, so to speak. And then I saw this absolutely wonderful young woman, as you do, when you're 21 and open to all possibilities, which sadly nothing came of it, but that did persuade me that perhaps that's where my future lay.
Yes.
Which it did. I moved back to Leeds from university. Moved into a women-only house. Do you remember them, Paula?
I do. I've just been hearing about them in the previous interview.
Yeah, women-only house. Well, lesbian-only house, I should say, actually. Yeah, and I went through several different groups of women living in there.
Was this in the 70s or the 80s?
This was the 80s. Yeah, the 80s. I moved back 86, I think. So it would have been the late 80s. So there was still lots of things going on. It was still quite active. There was still a lesbian line. We still had rape crisis. We still had discos. We still had places to go, people to see. Well, it's hard to explain, I think, to a lot of the younger people, women these days. It's tragic, isn't it? It's like you just took it for granted that it wasn't just certain pubs that you went to, that women had organised or would organise events, discos on a regular basis in other venues as well, and on their own without men.
Yeah.
So sometimes it was more civilized when they did organise them with men. Sometimes women on their own could get a bit raucous, it has to be said. And that was oh Lord, yes, that was when, oh yes, that was when all the S&M stuff was happening. I just remembered now. So there was lots of different things go. But I suppose what I mean is the lesbian scene was vibrant enough to actually have things going on.
Right.
Which I know it sounds weird when it was like a negative, but that's how big it was. That's how active it was. There were political lesbians, there were town lesbians, there were all sorts of lesbians and unconvinced lesbians in between, like myself. Whereas that definition is just so lacking now. And you don't find groups of women banding together to create things anymore, like lesbian lines, like rape crises, like anything, like domestic violence shelters that we did. Women had all done that in the last 10 years when I came out. So it was all still quite new that women had created all that. So I suppose we were still on the high from it. I don't think we realised how fortunate we were.
Well, I was going to say it's the same sort of era. I started our Women's Centre in 1986, and there was a lot going on. I remember being in a somewhere in Yorkshire, and there were 82 different women's centres came together. Oh no, it was Liverpool. And we were one of 3 that was just voluntary. And somehow the others had all got funding. And I remember there was a shift around that time. And I'm wondering if what happened was what I call the bureaucratisation of the voluntary sector.
Yes. Yeah, I think I do know what you mean, because I worked for the voluntary sector first, then I worked for the council.
Right.
And I could see some of the differences in approaches, shall we say, and how limited you were when, as the voluntary sector, when your funding was tied.
Yes, that's it, exactly.
What the issue is now, isn't it?
Yeah.
In so many ways as well.
Yeah. Were you aware? I mean, obviously you were in Leeds. Were you aware of Leeds being any different to any other place? Did you, if you'd have gone over to Manchester or down to London, do you think you'd have found that same vibrant lesbian culture in those cities as well?
We did go over to Manchester. There was loads going on in Manchester. I mean, we didn't go down to London much.
Yeah, stayed up north.
Yeah, but it's like we went over to Manchester. We'd go to Manchester for their regular discos. They had regular women's nights in Manchester. I mean, women's nights. And you'd go over and there'd be women from all over. I mean, we're talking about a huge pub or a huge nightclub full of women. You've got Bradford, same there. And now there's nothing. It feels quite isolated. Oh.
Can you remember how that felt to you in terms of being able to see other women like you around it? Was it helpful for you in finding out who you were to have others around you?
Well, I think it is for everybody, isn't it? And I don't think it's simply just people to reflect who you are, but it's people who maybe are also questioning. I think that is quite useful, or at least having the space to do that. And that's what I think is lacking now, having the space to do it, to really question where you are and what you're going for, and do you want to do this? And it's weird. It's become almost, women seem to be tied into a binary now. Yeah, if you don't do that, you've got to do this. And it's like, it didn't seem like that then.
So there was space to explore, really.
Oh yeah, there was, yeah, you could go to a disco run by political lesbians one night. You could go to a disco, you could go to a pub in town the next night. If you really wanted to, you go down to London to the bars and the clubs, which were women only as well. So there were options, there were choices, some good, some not so good, some bad. But is a choice ever really bad? It's a choice.
Yeah, plurality. Yeah, if there's plurality, then people can make the choice, I suppose.
Yeah, that's what we need to be able to. We need to be able to make bad choices in life to get to where we need to be.
Yes.
Yeah, we might learn far more from them than we do from the good choices.
I think one of the things about Leeds is that it's got such a well-known, well, if you know anything about feminism and radical feminism particularly, but it's got a proud history.
Oh, yes.
Of being a hotbed of real radical activism. Was that something you found your way to?
No, strangely enough. Well, not strangely enough, really. The sort of, as we lovingly called them, the Rev Rad Femmes, were based very much in South Leeds.
Right.
And really that was 70s, that it was very, very active. It was less active sort of 80s, partly because that's what happens once you've achieved some of your aims. You've kind of outgrown yourself as a movement, haven't you?
Yeah.
So different sorts of people move in. Yeah, so there was there were, like I said, there were different groups of women. There were some political, some not political. I wandered around on the edges because I've always been a bit of a wanderer.
Yes.
And it's like I've never really liked joining things, and I quite like the freedom of being on the edges and seeing lots of differences.
Yeah, it certainly puts you in a unique position to understand those different places as well, to get an all-round view. Yeah,
I think you can see far easier what's going on in lots of ways.
So did you ever experience any homophobia or lesbophobia? It's maybe within your family or, you know, your immediate friendship circles?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. I have to say my family were pretty cool. It was very much a don't talk about it, but we still love you type of affair. But, you know, there were staunch Irish Catholics. I couldn't expect much more than that.
Right.
I suppose by then my friendships, to some extent, like most kids who've gone through university, your friendship circles change, and it becomes very much based on university and a different group. And when I moved back to Leeds, it got based on the women that I met via the women's house I was in, and I met my first lover, which is always a totally overwhelming experience and one thankfully never to be repeated. And what was I saying? I've gone off track now.
Irish Catholic upbringing and friendship circles moving and shifting.
Yeah, I mean, the only homophobia I ever came across was like on nights out, or just the general sort of what the amusing, the terrible literal violence of misgendering whilst going into a toilet. You know, that happened on a regular basis to some of us, but you know, we're still here to survive.
Yes, resilient.
Yeah, amazing, isn't
all those years. Gosh, this way, sir. Actually, I'm a madam. Yes. So what was it you studied, Julie? And tell me about your working life.
Oh my Lord, I ended up studying sociology and politics. It was a foolish thing to do, but then that's what we do when we're young. We do foolish things. It didn't help at all in any aspect of my further life. But then I think there's very few university courses that do help you in future life. I don't think that's what a university course is about. I think it's about lots of things, but I don't think it's about preparing you to work in a particular field.
Yeah.
Apart from very few courses.
It's not vocational, really, is it?
Not at all. Certainly it's not sociology and politics. I didn't work at first. Well, I mean, I did. That's not true. I worked voluntarily. I did, collections of. I did rape. I was in Leeds, so I did Rape Crisis for ages, and Lesbian Line, and various things until I hit 30, when I thought I had to grow up and get a proper job. As you do. Yes. You know, when you hit 30, you think, right, I better get a sensible haircut and start wearing proper clothes and going and being a proper person. So I became a teacher, strangely enough. Bizarre, isn't it?
What with primary, secondary? What was your?
Oh, secondary. No, I can't cope with little kids.
Right. Secondary.
That bending down. Oh, it wouldn't do for me.
What was your subject?
English.
Right. Okay. And was that all Leeds based then?
No, I didn't actually work in Leeds, interestingly enough. I worked, my first job. In fact, it was my first job out of the university, was working out in Normanton, ex-coal mining village, really. That was quite an experience, I have to say. That was quite an experience. Oh, yes. Yes, it was.
What was it about it that makes you suck in your breath like that, Julie?
The old pit villages are they're a lot unto themselves. They're very separate from, I mean, they may only be a few miles away from like Leeds and Bradford, but it could as well be on another planet. Because I mean, the kids and the parents would never dream of coming for a night out in Leeds.
Yeah.
Because it's like, whoa, Leeds. Oh.
Yeah.
It was extremely white. I have never been surrounded by that many white people ever before or since. And that was really odd because growing up in Leeds, it's pretty multicultural. And I suppose you just take that for granted, don't you?
Mm.
Until it's not there and you think, oh, that's odd. But there were some really nice people, some really nice kids. And it was very clearly an area where you kept yourself to yourself, where as a teacher you would live within certain bounds, shall we say.
Had the bound of Section 28 come in yet? 1988.
Oh, right. It must have, because that was the early 90s.
Right.
I think. Oh, yes, I was doing that as well. I was involved in a housing co-op as well at that point. A women only, a lesbian only housing co-op. I forgot about that. Blimey. I have done some interesting things in my life.
There you go. That's the purpose of these interviews.
To remind me.
Proud lesbians, yes. So yeah, Section 28 in school.
It had come in, but to be perfectly honest, the ethos of the school was so very, very straight, white, and working class.
Yeah.
And it was my first job, so it was like there was a limit to what you would even try to do. And the really interesting thing was my next job was in Batley, working at a Muslim girls' school.
Wow.
Frying pan fire.
Yeah.
I actually had quite a lot of freedom within certain bounds there because I was the only teacher because it was a tiny, tiny girls' school.
Right.
But oh yeah, I enjoyed that. The girls were really, really nice. Some of them were little fuckers, but that's happenings, doesn't it?
So, I mean, that's interesting because like the working class ethos that there was in Normanton, and then immediately you're in an all girls school, a Muslim girls school, and you've lived in a very diverse city. So I hate the word, but I'm going to use it, the intersection between race and class and lesbianism, all of that, you were living all of those realities, weren't you? Seeing them around you.
Well, they're part of life.
Yes.
Or at least if you are working class, that's part of your life. I mean, I'm not from the BME community. Well, I am because I'm Irish, but I'm not black and I'm not brown. So the racism I experienced was different, very, very different, thankfully, in some ways. But it was that they were always part of life, the same way that being lesbian is. It's just something you grow up with, something you grow old with.
Yeah. Being able to immerse yourself or being immersed in a school that is actually of one faith. Did that give you an insight into that particular culture, that particular faith?
I think it did, yeah, because via the girls, their parents, who I would talk to occasionally, and the other teachers, we got very close, and I found a lot of positive things in Islam for women, because the women there found some positive things in Islam. And that's when I learned that actually Islam doesn't actually say what those blokes said it says.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was obvious to a lot of people. But when you're talking about a mainly working class community, in fact, peasantry, because that's what it is, isn't it? In these pre-industrialized countries, people don't read, and they're not encouraged to learn to read.
Yeah.
And why are they not encouraged to read? Well, they're easy to control, aren't they? So it's always women. If there's any education on offer, men are going to get it.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. So you did mention already that that rich lesbian life that there was around you when you were first out. Hello, Kat, and growing up.
Sorry, oh, good. It's not a bum in your face. That's the usual thing, isn't it?
That doesn't seem to be around now. What about the change in representation of lesbians, say in popular culture, or the availability of books and music and films and what have you? Do you feel that's changed in your lifetime?
Changed, yes, but I can't say it's always a good thing, because I think, like lots of places, Hollywood, whether it's Hollywood or whether it's capitalism generally, tends to, I suppose the word is fetishize and monetize things, whatever's the in thing at the moment. And I do think that's what they did. I don't think that's what they've always done. They've always gone with whatever the fashion is. And for a long time, that lesbians were fashionable. We're not so fashionable now. We're fairly uncool.
Yeah.
But I'm fairly happy about that, to be honest, in some ways, because the coolness didn't always look great. And the representation wasn't always great. What happened? What was it about? What was all those lesbians dying to do with? None of them could be happy in a relationship. They always had to die, or something awful happened. Well, first it was gay men, of course, because of course it would be, wouldn't it? And eventually they got onto women, but God blimey.
Yeah, there's rarely a book, a film or a story, if there is one, that doesn't have somebody either who's a nutter or who dies very soon.
You see, I remember when Michael Cashman was a really good force for good.
Really?
When he was in EastEnders, do you not remember?
No, I've never watched telly, so I'm no good at that.
He was brilliant. It was the first regular depiction of a gay man on telly, then a regular depiction of a gay relationship on telly. It was the first regular person. And it was very, very positive. And that, I suppose that's why I've just looked at him since and done that absolute horror. People grow in their own ways, I suppose.
Well, they do. They do. So although it might have increased, what I'm hearing is that the representation isn't necessarily that you would want it to be. So there's still a lack, isn't there, of lesbian role models.
Weird. It's not just, I think it's like everything else. It's very tokenistic. It's like almost like you can see a tick list of what people have to have on a series to be okay. First of all, it was the black family. We have to have a black family in to be seen as really okay. Then eventually you have to have maybe you have to have a bisexual son or a son who might be a bit, that way inclined. And then you would gradually move on to lesbians. But now it's got to the other end of where they're tick boxing all the groups off. It's like every single group they can think of that needs representation will tick them off. So it's like, that's not natural. That's not a natural occurrence.
Yeah.
That's not, and they're not going to be written naturally.
Yeah.
But then I've given up watching telly, to be honest, Paul, so I'm not the right one to ask.
Right. Well, there you go. So when you were talking about your early life, obviously you were active in politics anyway. Do you have any connection at all to any of the political parties? And if so, what are your thoughts about them nowadays?
I have an extremely tenuous connection to the Labour Party, and I have had since, well, all my life, really. Like most Irish Catholics in this country, as well as church and football and unions, the Labour Party is part of your life. Doesn't happen anymore. It's another part of life that's gone. But at that point, you got a job, you joined a union, you voted Labour. That was you set for the rest of your life. And I mean, I have always voted Labour. I've sometimes not always stayed in the party. Sometimes we have had divergences of ways. I'm currently back in the party for the fourth time, can't remember. And in fact, I'm women's officer of my CLP.
All right.
But I'm up for election again next week, so who knows?
Right. Right. Well, that must be a challenging thing to be at the moment, Julie.
It's an extremely challenging
thing. What on earth made you step into that particular breach?
Because nobody was doing it and it needed doing. And it's like, come on, get it sorted then. And no one was doing it. It's what I find over such a lot of things. That it's like, we need to do this. Well, come on then, let's do it. Let's get it sorted.
Yes.
And no one does. It's like,
yeah, you are a yes woman, I have to say. My knowledge of you is Julie's one of those, a bit like me, actually. We end up picking up the slack sometimes.
But well, I don't even think it's that. I think it's just the, well, if it needs doing, just bloody get on with it.
Yeah.
Stop complaining.
So what have the debates been in your Labour Party around, for instance, the manifesto commitment to both self-ID and to not change or to uphold the Equalities Act and single-sex spaces? Has that come up as a topic for discussion?
Oh, yes. Because we have, as an MP, Alex Sobel, in fact, right, who took to Twitter some time ago in a very negative manner, telling people that they were bigots, so their votes, he didn't want their votes. And no, they didn't have a right to women don't have a right to single-sex spaces. How he could say that, I don't know, because it's like we had a manifesto commitment at that point to single-sex spaces. But as a result of that, I decided to bring a motion to CLP via my branch, arguing for the protection of single-sex spaces, which deliberately kept very, very much on the protecting single-sex spaces.
Yes.
As a manifesto commitment. And that kept it to that. And I got it through branch just about, but at CLP, oh my Lord, it got hijacked, it got turned into all women, including trans women, which is like, that's not what says in the manifesto. B, it's not what it says in the law. Why are they so ignorant? But they are. So they've got this totally ridiculous policy on file, which is against the manifesto, that actually is illegal as the law stands at the moment.
Yeah, it's probably replicated across the country. And one of the things that we have been trying to do with Lesbian Labour is to get some top-down instruction on that. We tried it with Marcia de Cordova and tried to explain to her how this was playing out in CLPs around the country, because this is Labour being a bottom-up organisation, supposedly. This is where that argument needs to be had and won.
And then she went.
Yeah.
Or was she pushed?
Well, I think
Who knows?
nobody will ever really know, but you know, Annalisa is doing what she's trying to do. We're still talking to her. But you know, at every single branch where anybody is brave enough to bring this up, there'll be that same non-debate happening, because it's not being discussed properly. If Keir is, as he says, committed to that dual promise in the manifesto, there needs to be some solution found to that.
Yeah, he needs to accept that actually there are conflicts around that.
Yeah.
Which you can't resolve by refusing to talk about them.
No. So, you know, in Leeds generally, is there much of a debate around this outside Labour? Is it a hot topic in your city?
I think, like in most cities, the vast majority of the population are like, what? You are? Very few people have heard of the Gender Recognition Act, have any idea what it means, have no concept of why I've got a poster in my porch actually saying keep prison single sex. It just doesn't, they don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's all been kept quiet and nothing's been done openly. And no, there is no public consultation that is really public on any of this. And so in Leeds, there isn't very much, but it's the university city, which we have to remember. So there's a vast amounts of students, and particularly in my CLP, which covers the university and what used to be the poly in the old days. And this is why it's a bit of a no-go, which is why I'm wondering whether I'm likely to get re-elected or not. Part of me doesn't really care, because it's easier to criticise from the backbenches and say rude things like men aren't women, because I have to be careful as a role holder what I say, but I don't have to otherwise.
Yeah.
We'll see. There's more. I know there's more people on all the forums I'm on talking about it.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I'm not on an awful lot of forums because I've been thrown off so many.
Yeah.
Over the time for some bizarre reason.
So you mentioned the number of university students. Do you think there is a class difference going on in you know, university-led thinking on this and young people all singing from the same song sheet versus
hugely?
Yeah.
Huge. Sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Hugely. It's like, I mean, yeah, there are working class kids who struggle with their mental health and get diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Might have been eating disorders 10 years ago. Before that, it would have been cutting and self-harming. Before that, it would have been something else. But they don't have the absolute time and ridiculous amount of energy that students have to just be filled with this bollocks of gender ideology. And the sex is a spectrum. And young people are stupid. You're allowed to be stupid when you're young. It's expected of you. It's like I was saying about bad choices aren't bad choices. They're just choices that make you learn a bit more. That's when you do most of them, isn't it? And this is one fucking major, huge bad choice on their part.
You know, I've been trying to think about how it compares to other major movements and attempts to change the social norm. And I was thinking back to hippies and the 60s and all of that. And, you know, oh God, that was a major, excuse me a minute, that was a major shift and trying to change the values of society. And I'm trying to think, is this as big as that? Is there really a moment now where we have to do away with heteronormativity and accept all comers? Is this alphabet that keeps growing the way forward? If I try and step away from my own personal feelings and think of it sociologically. So where are you on that and this ever expanding alphabet?
When I first came across this, because for a long time I didn't, kids and things, you just don't, you were too busy doing normal things. But when I first came across it, I thought, oh, wow, this sounds great. I thought it sounds liberating, they're playing with gender, until I realized that they're actually not. They're creating more boxes, and they're creating very, very tight boxes, much tighter than they ever used to be. And then that's when I started realizing that, no, this is harmful. And then I started hearing the sex is a spectrum shit and just thought, they're all bonkers. They're actually bonkers. But I think it's more than that for me. I think for me, I don't know that it is just about the whole sexuality spectrum, because I think it's just been used as that. But I think there's a combination of things going on. There is that whole sexuality thing that needs loosening up. But the more you try and loosen something, the tighter it becomes quite often. And that's what's happening. But that's also what's happening societally in different ways. Because what I've noticed around other issues are very similar types of discussions now.
Right.
Like when we talk to people about other things, it's almost like when we started trying to engage with the gender ideology, it was very much about engaging with a cult and people doing mantras at you and saying, you have to believe this or else you're a non-believer. But what I've then found, because I tend to have unpopular opinions about various things, is that whole thought process seemed to be spreading into other areas of thinking.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just confined to around gender ideology. It was spreading into lots of different, for example, into the area about that Palestine became a prime example.
Yes.
Anti-Semitism became a prime example. And obviously they're not the same argument, and that's one of the issues. But then more that recently, COVID became the same thing. Very much so, people came into camps.
Yes, absolutely.
But then about when Ukraine was invaded.
Yeah. And
some of us said, oh my God, how awful it is for them. But did you know that this was also happening and that actually the Ukraine had been fighting a war against its own people for the last 8 years? People suddenly started accusing you of being a Putin apologist, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And talking from the Kremlin hymn book. And it's like, I'm sorry, I'm not a believer in anything, the Kremlin or anything else. So I don't have hymn books.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's almost as if on all subjects, everything's tightening.
I think you're really, really right there, Julie. And I haven't actually had that conversation with anybody else, but I've noticed exactly those things. And I remember being at Labour Party conference and actually hearing the same sort of the way women have been silenced and treated in the Labour Party, talking to Palestinian support groups and hearing that they were going through the same thing. There was somebody standing outside with a leaflet about the witch hunt, and it was a specific, union issue, but somebody had been silenced within that. And you're right, it's almost like a new methodology where there's an absolutist and very clear set of you've got to be this camp or that camp. And if you say the wrong thing, then we will actually, the cancel culture thing is real. And I noticed it, like you, when the invasion of Ukraine happened. Of course it was wrong. I don't know anybody that said it was a good idea.
No one said that.
But you have to look at what's the context in which this has happened, who's controlling the narrative, where's the propaganda coming from, and just trying to explore that. I came up against what you did. And it was, and I just thought the last time there was a war, I did exactly the same things. I'm an anti-war protester. I've always done the same things. You look who's got the vested interest, who's going to be benefiting from this, what are the arguments for and against it, let's get on with it and stop it.
And then Labour want to get rid of Stop the War and get rid of all and actually make it a prescribed organisation.
Yeah, that to me shows that it is a bigger thing, and I think you're right. And it's easy to get locked into fighting as lesbians for our survival.
There's women who we've been fighting with, Paula, for the last 2 or 3 years, isn't there?
Yeah.
Who have had exactly the same thing said to them that they've turned around and said to us.
Yeah.
So they've just used different words instead of gender, Ukraine.
Yes, exactly. So let's go to there actually, Julie, because Pride 2018. And whether or not you'd ever been part of Pride before that, what do you think about Pride marches? And tell me something about that, please.
I was involved in setting up, well, I wasn't involved in setting up, but yeah, I was involved in the beginnings of, I suppose, the Pink Picnic in Leeds, which was the precursor, if you will, to Pride in Leeds. And it was a very family-friendly thing. It was literally a pink picnic. We would go have a picnic on Hyde Park with the kids. It would sort of grow a little bit by little bit. We'd invite people to sing. Had to have stalls. Became bigger and bigger and louder, and started to move into town and got more. I mean, I went down to London to Pride when it was still Lesbian and Gay Pride. But then suddenly it became Pride one year, didn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like, Pride? What's wrong with Lesbian and Gay Pride? That's what it's about, isn't it? And it wasn't, and that felt a bit weird. It's like paying to get in, to celebrate. And then that started that whole paying and global corporatization, which comes back to the whole fetishization that Hollywood and places and the whole capitalism do with groups such as ourselves. It's like we're not seen as, we're just money makers.
Yeah.
So get the most possible. And then Pride became something very, very different that I didn't want to be part of. I mean, I did go in with a couple of times with kids, but it was like, no, I don't think so. There's all sorts of things. I mean, I don't think Leeds Pride was as bad as some of the others. Some of the others are horrendous. What the things they show, the people who wear and don't wear what they don't wear. And it's just, I wouldn't take a kid now.
Yeah,
ever.
Not family friendly.
So then I ended up going to a series of prides in Yorkshire one year with some friends of mine, because lesbians were getting erased from Pride. Like Pride had erased gays and lesbians and bisexuals. Literally, we didn't exist. Someone actually said to me, Pride's for everybody. And I said, no, it's specifically for us. And it's like, these people have no idea what it's about. It's about getting pissed. It's about getting as many drugs as you can. And it's about dancing all night, which is fine if that's what you want to do, but do it in a way that allows other people to do what needs to be done as well, to show pride in who they are. which is not walking half naked down streets in front of kids or wearing leather. Oh, I can't even go there. But yeah, so as lesbians started to leave Pride, I and some friends got more to the viewpoint that actually maybe we needed to go to these prides and actually stand there and say, no, we're lesbians, this is what a lesbian is, and we're not shifting on it. So we did. I think we went to Bradford, York, Sheffield. Oh, it was raining really hard, peeing it down. And then we went to Leeds. Oh, and at one point the entire parade stopped and turned to us and started shouting at us. The entire parade, and of course everybody who was around started, and it was just. And of course, lots of other lesbians went to other prides as well. Like Lancaster Pride. The pictures I saw from there were horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. The police were absolutely worse than useless. And how no one was really hurt is beyond me. But thankfully, no one was.
And what was it that you were saying that was so annoying to other people? How peculiar as lesbians being at Pride? What was it that was the
Paula, you tell me, standing there with a banner that says lesbians don't have penises. What is so shocking about that?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? And if you say lesbians are same-sex attracted, you'd get the same derision thrown in a different direction.
One of the different banners, same-sex attracted.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can see how it would be seen as confrontational, but I mean, there were so few of us there doing it that it was obvious we weren't there to create huge amounts of violence and hurt anybody.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know it was obviously literal violence just by having those words written there. I mean, the rivers of blood flowing through Bradford and places, Paul. You've just seen it. All those poor dead and dying trans women. Oh.
The thing obviously that then caught as usual, what goes on up north doesn't get as much publicity as down south. Obviously 2018 and the holding up of the London Pride by
that was first.
Yes, similar banners. And I remember the year after having a conversation. In fact, there was going to be, why the hell are we bothering going? I remember various plotting and plannings. One of the things was to buy a ticket and get in there and then have a flash mob of lesbians that had managed to get in. And I remember one of the other ideas was to be at Trafalgar Square when the march arrived with umbrellas and put the umbrellas up and create, there was all sorts of creative thinking. But I do remember there was a general feeling amongst lesbians, why do we want to be associated anyway? We don't. Let's do our own thing. And that's when a certain Julie Furlong, I remember, came up with this idea of dickless pride. I remember that.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying about stop bloody complaining if it's not happening, just make it happen. And women have been complaining all over the place for years. And it's like, well, it's not as if lesbian marches haven't happened before. Just create one.
Yes.
It can't be that difficult, can it? She says, never having done one. So just got a group of women together and we did it, didn't we, Paula?
Well, Dickless Pride changed its name very quickly to Lesbian Strength.
I still like Dickless Pride, though.
Well, we know.
But yes, I understand why it had to change.
Yes. Yes.
Because it was about lesbian strength. That's the whole story. That's what it was about for me, and that's what it was about for everybody who's attended.
And I suppose really it also drawing on the herstory of
Oh,
previous
yes,
Lesbian Strength as well.
very much.
Yeah.
And
So,
in Leeds, because it had to be in Leeds because of our history of the radical feminists here.
Yeah.
And what they'd achieved over the years. Then we needed, I mean, Reclaim the Night started here. Well, the British Reclaim the Nights was brought over here first and started here first by, I think, by Al Garthwaite. I think she was one of the first people who did it.
Yeah.
She's now councillor in Leeds City Council.
So, Lesbian Strength, Julie, tell me about it this year.
Oh, this year, Paul, it's going to be ever so different. Well, it is and it isn't. The collective has changed. We've had a total influx of these gorgeous new women and lots of energy, which I find extremely nice. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
I find it wonderful to be surrounded by these younger women who've got energy. And we're organising things. And yet we've had problems. We've not had it easy. Our GoFundMe's been shut down, as has happened to so many women, that they've been targeted. And once you target someone's finances, then that does create a big problem. But we were always very clear that no matter what happened with our finances, we were marching this year. It was going to be a march, even if we couldn't afford to have a sound system, we'd have megaphones. If we couldn't afford to have this, we'd have that. If we couldn't afford that, it was happening. That wasn't in doubt. It was, how was it happening?
Yeah. And when is it happening, Julie?
It's happening on September the 17th, which is a Saturday, fortunately. At 2 p.m.
At 2 p.m. Okay.
At Leeds City Square, which is luckily right opposite the train station. You come right out the train station, there is City Square.
There you go. So that's the
bus station also isn't far.
And where will it march to?
We're not going on a long route, but we're marching to Millennium Square, which is where Leeds City Council's Civic Hall is. There is some reasoning behind that, but also that's where it was last time. Yes. It's a large space. There will be chairs, as there was last time, for those of us who are a bit tired. Also, for anybody who can't make the march or all of it, there will be ways to cut it short, and there will be people to help them, to assist them. So we're looking, and for anybody who's actually of impaired mobility, there's a variety of things we've done. Oh, I haven't done it. The route itself is flat. That's fortunate. But we chose it because it was flat, and we chose it because it wasn't going to be dead long route. It was and it was also a route where you could come off at various points and cut it short and come straight to Millennium Square. And if women can't make the march at all, and there are some women who couldn't do it last year, you can just go straight to Millennium Square and sit down and wait for everybody.
And who is it for?
Lesbians.
And what's a lesbian, Julie?
A lesbian, as we all know, as the world knows, is a solely same-attracted woman.
Same-sex attracted adult female
woman.
Yes. Who would have thought we'd have to put that many names behind the word lesbian? But anyway, if anyone has any doubt, that's who it's for. If you're interested in anything else, off you go to something else. This is just for that specific.
We are quite happy to have our female sisters helping us. From any other community, we don't of whether they're straight, whether they're bi, whatever. If you want to help us and be a steward or a legal observer, or you want to be one of the people who assist someone who might be disabled or who are unable to do something, there's room. There are things that we will need bodies for.
Yes. So
get in touch. Donate to us.
Yes.
Spread the message if you financially can't afford it, because life's hard at the minute. Lots of people can't. Spread the message.
Lesbian Strength.
Let lesbians know.
It's got a website.
We've got Twitter.
Find it.
We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram.
Everywhere. Lesbians are everywhere, Julie. And
except TikTok, because we don't understand that.
Partly down to you and your fabulous work and the refusal to give up, I'd say. So if anyone needs anything done, Julie Furlong's your woman. And thank you very much for the interview, Julie.
That is perfectly all right, Paula. I wish you well with the rest of your series.
Thank you.
And I